Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FairTax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, August 23rd, 2019. Is the feeding frenzy finally ending for the swamp? Throughout history, there have been many instances where one group became the ruling class and owes their fortunes and success not to useful creations that benefit many, but to the efforts of others. In fact, that seems to be more the rule than the exception in history. These groups often ignored the warning signs that their subjects were getting ready to revolt. In retrospect, historians have often been amazed at how a ruling class failed to take certain steps in time to prevent a mass rebellion. It's obvious that passing the fair tax is seen as a direct threat to the swamp and their allies in Congress because it will dramatically reduce their income and their control over us. The election of President Trump was seen by many analysts in large part as a message to the swamp that the people were beginning to realize that their interests were being treated as secondary to those of a ruling elite. The swamp either didn't get the message, or they decided arrogantly to ignore the message they are getting from we the people. They are just not willing to stop enriching themselves and their friends. They keep right on doing what's best for them, even though they know it harms the rest of us. The swamp and their allies in Congress are making the same mistakes that led to the guillotine for Louis XVI and the basement execution of Tsar Nicholas and his family. Now, while we don't expect that the swamp will suffer quite the same fate as those despots, their time to take advantage of the rest of us is running out. Now, there is a protection against the swamp in the Constitution. The authors of the U.S. Constitution had a deep distrust of government. They knew that throughout history, governments tended to grow into an organism that served itself, not the people. So for this reason, they inserted Article 5 into the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 gives the states the power to call a convention of states to propose amendments to the Constitution. It takes 34 states to call the convention and 38 to ratify any amendments that are proposed. 15 states have now passed the needed resolutions calling for a convention, and the list is growing. Now, each state that ratifies the Convention of States is another shot across the bow of the swamp. Ultimately, the members of Congress may wake up and try to do things that really are in the best interests of the people, but if they don't do this soon, then the Convention of States is going to do it for them. Phil Henson is a longtime supporter of the fair tax and is one of its more knowledgeable and articulate advocates. Phil has decided that the Convention of States is absolutely necessary if the American people are going to throw off the shackles placed on them by the swamp and their allies in Congress. This is a recent post of his that we wanted to share. Our founding fathers did not always refer to the type of government they were creating in the same way. Benjamin Franklin famously answered a questioner if the Constitution created a republic or a monarchy. Franklin replied as he left the Constitutional Convention, "A republic if you can keep it." James Madison answered the question by using representative democracy sometimes and republic at other times. Here are two Madison quotes that illustrate this point. The effect of a representative democracy is to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of the nation. And the second quote, it is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part, end of quote. Now, today it's obvious that a group of politicians, lobbyists, and bureaucrats, i.e. the ruling class, had decided that what is what's best for them, even if it does not benefit us, or even if it actually harms us, their subjects. Now, to accomplish their purposes, the ruling class has imposed more and more limitations on our basic liberties and freedoms. Now, regardless of what the Founding Fathers intended, a representative democracy or a republic, they would be uniformly horrified if they saw what their creation has evolved into today. They simply would not recognize what they created. They would ask why we, as a people, did not use the very power that they put into the Constitution to protect us against this type of terrible outrage by a ruling class being perpetrated on the people. That, of course, being the Article 5 Convention. Now, my thought process, while considering what I could do to address this usurpation of our country by the ruling class, led me to look at the safeguards that the Founding Fathers inserted into the Constitution, i.e. the Convention of States. Now, I am very results-oriented, and I simply don't see another way of addressing the growing chasm between we the people and the ruling class. Perhaps there is a better way, but I've tried for over 30 years to get politicians to listen, and while they say they heard me, they almost always act in accordance with the directions of the ruling class. The ruling class has proven over and over again that if there is a proposed solution to a problem that dilutes their power, they will oppose it and prevent it from happening. Again, most of them see us as their subjects, and they believe that our job is to support whatever objectives benefit them. They see no reason to listen to us because they know best. A government that is not based on trust can only be sustained by force, and this eventually leads to a revolt of the oppressed. Now, I think that job one for all Americans should be restoring the essential trust that the people we elect will ensure that our representative democracy/republic is perpetuated in this very different 21st century. This is true regardless of ideological leanings or political party affiliation. While I'm well aware that this course of action is not entirely free of risk, I'm also reminded that, 1, this nation was not formed on risk avoidance, and risk avoidance has never been the be-all, end-all of the various policy decisions that have made this the freest and most prosperous nation on earth. As Dr. Tom Coburn has stated, our national character has always been one that elevated courage over fear. This is the heritage that all of us as Americans carry with us. And 2, the risks, according to Professor Antonin Scalia, who would subsequently become a Supreme Court justice, said those risks are quite nominal and reasonable relative to the potential rewards. That is to ask, is this nation worth taking some minimal risk to save? Do we simply stand by and watch a legacy that prior generations have fought and bled for evaporate into thin air? Or do we do everything in our power to stop it? Now, I'll be the first one, if this does not work or if it's hijacked by the political ruling class, to say, well, we tried that, so what else do we have? I simply refuse to be paralyzed by fear and to watch the disintegration of our great nation simply because there were no risk-free alternatives available. In conclusion, the swamp and their allies in Congress like the present income payroll tax system because of the compulsory contribution that each of us has to make to it, and because they can directly threaten us by reducing the amount of money that each of us will have for our family's consumption purposes, and also, of course, because it helps the swamp grow richer and richer. When I was growing up, there was an old joke about someone wanting to cross the street. They asked their companion to look to the right and see if anything was coming. When they heard the reply, nothing but a greyhound, they stepped into the street and were promptly run over by a greyhound bus. Well, the Convention of States is coming. But if Congress wakes up in time and starts doing the right thing, much of the momentum for the Convention of States movement will slow down. But if they remain oblivious, then the light they see at the end of the tunnel is the headlight of a train coming at them to sweep them right off the track. Isn't it time for us to reclaim our freedom from the swamp and their allies in Congress by putting us back in control? Anyone who truly cares about the American people should say, it is time to pass the FairTax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org or bigsolution.org.